MLOps is hard. I'm always saying it's hard. It's not a beginner's job. It's very easy to deploy an AI application if you ignore all the hard parts. If you're using OpenAI or GPT-5, we can't even guarantee that today, like at 9 o'clock and at 12 o'clock, it's exactly the same model. They may have changed something, you have no idea, and suddenly your system doesn't behave anymore. Step by step, you could trick it into revealing something that you're not supposed to know. How do you even put guardrails in that? No one knows. Do I really need this complexity? Do I even need an agent? Do I need an LLM?
Those are the best questions. If you don't need it, don't use it.
That's why I believe MLOps will be very, very popular in the upcoming years.
If you're a software engineer and responsible for bringing AI models to production, this episode is for you. We go through the basics of MLOps, specifically for software engineers. How to build out your proof of concept into a production-worthy solution with evals, observability, and much, much more. Joining me today is Maria Vechtomova, co-founder of Marvelous MLOps and co-founder of Couchy. And she's been in the MLOps space for over a decade, which makes her the perfect person to have this conversation with. So enjoy.
What excites me personally the most is that when you deliver value. And that's a tricky part because everyone is overly excited about agentic development and trying to apply it everywhere where it also doesn't necessarily make sense. And that part doesn't necessarily excite me. But yeah, I think the whole LLM hype did a lot of good for MLOps. Finally, we have attention to monitoring. That's a topic that was always important, but no one cared about it that much. It's kind of, monitoring. We know it's important, we don't have it. And now suddenly everyone started paying attention to it. Also because software engineers started doing it more, right? Before they were just data scientists. Now it's coming from a different angle.
Yes, tangible in a product.
Yes, indeed. So that's one of the things that I definitely like about it. And also, finally, we pay attention to serving. That serving your agent becomes an important problem. And in the past, all of these tools are, kind of wacky. I don't you bump into limits very fast, and now they realize that's a limitation, and they're working on it. So that's what I also like about this.
Yeah, I like that a lot. What are some of the implementations you've seen that really deliver value, that actually work?
Yeah. Well, I don't know how much I can talk really about the use cases.
Fine.
Well, I think for internal processes, I think it makes a lot of sense. When you have some kind of documents and you need to do something, I don't know, every week, and you spend hours on it, you can largely automate it. And parts of this decision making can be outsourced to an agent. So that's where I see a lot of value, that time saving. Also NLP heavy applications in the past. I think telecom, you have all these custom interactions, and you need to forward to the right agent or to the right problem solution. And in the past, I worked for a telco before, so I know these processes are already pretty well defined. It's just someone had to go through it, route it to the right place, and now all of that can be done with agents. And I think it's a great opportunity, and definitely it saves a lot of money there. Yes,
I've seen it specifically at booking, for example, applied between the client, which is the user that just books something, and then the person that offers the booking, like a hotel or something. And they have something in between that gets the context from the dialogue that's going on and sees and checks for tone of voice and sees if it's actually appropriate to send to the other party. I was like, that's very interesting. And then it also quite quickly gets into a level of scale and complexity, because you also have the language factor in there. Certain models are better with different languages. And I have no clue, but it sounds like a fun challenge.
Yeah, definitely. And I think in general, teams spend so much time on, doing hands-on work where it's not per se needed. And can be outsourced to an agent. Something related to analytics work that business comes with the same questions all the time. I guess you could make dashboards, but instead you could have this kind of AI BI tools. Of course, that must be applied with caution. But I think business has pretty good understanding of what they're supposed to see. And actually, in fact, analysts, when they come up with the numbers, they're also validated with the business. So for a lot of these steps can be just skipped by giving directly access to the data and to this interface to the business users. And that's also what I think very valuable these days. Yeah.
Nice. You've been involved in the MLOps community for a long time, even
Yes.
before the AI hype.
Yeah.
And now software engineers are really looking into fitting in Gen AI solutions in their products. What will they have to know with regards to MLOps from a basics perspective?
Yeah, well, I think they need to learn a little bit of data science, the basics of data science, because it's very easy to deploy an AI application if you ignore all the hard parts.
Okay.
Because it's just regular software if you look at it that way. But all the parts around it are related to evaluation. Those are very close to data science. The problem here is the data gathering. You actually need humans to come up with with expectations. What is expected from an agent and what is the correct answer? And that answer also can be vague, right? So you don't really know. So this clear evaluation of what we are evaluating for, and what are the examples of these proper responses. So that must be gathered, and that's something that a lot of people just ignore. Like it doesn't exist. It's not a problem at all. It just also the fine tuning of the agent, like how the agent is built, is not really done properly. It's just, it kind of works. It kind of something working. It comes up with something that looks okay. Yeah, it's a black box. But it's not really a black box. It can be pretty well evaluated if you come up with these metrics first, include business users or whoever is using this application from the very beginning, and have these kind of data sets available. And there are nice tools like MLflow tracing, where you can get very deep insights in what's happening within the agent, like LLM calling, tool calling, and reasoning steps. All of this can be logged, and you can also give feedback on these steps. So each of these steps can be also evaluated by a human or by an LLM. And that can be used for monitoring purposes. Also things like, on average, we have 5 times tool calling for an agent, and now we have 30. So something is going wrong there, and you want to get alerted in these kind of anomalies. So this is also something you want to pay attention to. From what I've seen, people mostly go the easy route, ignoring all of these hard parts. And they also disattach all the pieces, right? But typically, you have some kind of data processing. And if you have PDFs, you are going to parse this PDF, do OCR, do chunking, you use some vector search. You also maybe extract some metadata, store it in some SQL database. And then you define tools for your agent. Maybe you have MCP server as well. So this process is kind of it's something that needs to run periodically once you get a new batch of data. In that sense, it's very similar to how data scientists work. There is also data pre-processing work that is embedded into it. Then you have the agent definition itself that consists of the logic of the agent, the system prompts, and all of these components that are also moving a lot. Like if LLM changes, it may start behaving weirdly, right?
Yeah.
Like there are so many moving pieces that you need to control. And in that way, it's much harder to control than an ML model, a standard ML model. And then you have this when you deploy the agent. I like Databricks a lot, and I use Databricks a lot. So there are processes that MLflow allows for. So for example, when you register a new version of the model, the deployment job will start. And it's not just it's going to deploy right away. No, it has an evaluation step using, this kind of approach that I was talking about before. And then you have a manual approval step. So actually a human is going to look at it, maybe evaluate in certain ways, look at traces maybe, and then we can go and deploy. You can also say, okay, maybe for some processes we don't want a human to approve, but maybe an agent.
Yeah.
It's also possible because it's an API call in the end, right? So there are these components that you need to think about, but also the governance part of these agents, right? So you have to. So if the agent is deployed behind an endpoint, you have governance on top of the agent, but also on top of the LLM that it's using.
Okay.
So to ensure that there are guardrails, that there is no PII data involved or being processed, things like that, right?
The funny thing is, like when I started with AI within a product, and also I looked online, people are saying for software engineers, it's nothing new, right? Because it's just an API call away. And right now, if I hear you say like evaluations, figuring out your context, figuring out what actually is valid with regards to using an agent or a model behind the scenes, then the governance and the guardrails.
Yeah.
If that all of a sudden becomes also a responsibility of a software engineer, it's a lot on their plate because they don't just have to think of implementation, but also these are all data science principles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
MLOps is hard.
MLOps is hard.
What can I say, right? I'm always saying it's hard. It's not the beginner's job.
Yeah.
And it's hard for pretty much anyone because data scientists, they also just, work with notebooks. It's pretty much industry standard, which I'm trying to fight. But yeah, that's the truth. They are not great at following software engineering practices.
Yeah.
It now gets better, but it's still not quite there. And software engineers, they often lack these data science principles. They never learned them because it was never their job. Now we need to kind of merge it together. And I think that for the first time in history, we actually get this opportunity to merge it. And so that's why I believe MLOps will be very, very popular in the upcoming years.
That is a fun and exciting time, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Like I can get up and running really quickly, but that's just a proof of concept.
Of
I've
course.
had many people on the podcast, and they say the part from proof of concept to production is incredibly difficult. So from your perspective, what is the minimum set that I actually need in production? Because I feel like a real mature production solution is going to be very different from, let's say, my first version that goes to production.
Yeah. Well, all of the components I just mentioned.
That's already a lot, yeah.
Yes, I haven't mentioned all of them even, so there are more.
Yeah.
So like you want to monitor what's going in your systems, what's going out of your systems at like each step really. You want to keep track of it. And there are tools for it today, like ML for tracing. And you can also dump all this information into open telemetry supported tooling like Datadog, or you can put them in Delta tables, sync it to Delta tables. But also observability on top, like who was calling that API?
Yeah.
And how long did it take to give the response back? And maybe put some limits on certain users that they can't use more than so many tokens or things like that. So there are these kind of guardrails that you want to implement on top of that as well. And I find that it's also part of MLOps. So yeah, you need to have these data processing pipelines. You need to have evaluation pipelines. You need to have deployment pipelines, human in the loop pipelines, and all the governance as well on top. And what I talk about as a MLOps principle a lot is traceability and reproducibility. You need to know what data was used. You need to know what code was used, what environment was used. And with ML models, it's more straightforward than, I guess, with the agents, because as I said, there are so many more moving pieces.
Yeah.
We can't even guarantee that LLM, I know if you're using OpenAI, that, GPT-5, that today, like at 9 o'clock and at 12 o'clock, it's exactly the same model. No, you can't. Probably it's not. They may have changed something. You have no idea. And suddenly your system doesn't behave anymore. I mean, it can happen. And even though you don't have a monitoring on top of that in place, that I guess monitors in real time, whether your answers get skewed somehow based on LLM evaluators, because, there is no way you can let humans label things real time, right?
It's not going to
No, but at least some kind of, it gives some kind of idea.
Okay.
And what you see, it's actually funny, at SRE Con, we had this discussion about observability of ML systems. And there were some awesome people that do it like for a very long time. Todd Underwood, I think he retired now, but back then not yet. He that Tropic head of SRE, and together with Neil Murphy, they wrote a book on MLOps and SRE.
Yeah.
So it's, all of the things they talk about is still very much valid. So at Azure, for example, I think to evaluate their models, they use whether internal employees give thumbs up to the model and how often and whether it's going to change over time, because it's actually really hard to tie it to certain standard evaluations. And the more generic your model is, the harder it is. Mm-hmm. So the more generic your agent is, the harder it is.
Yeah.
So that's why I really believe in specialized agents that only do very specific tasks, or maybe not even agents, just LLM workflows. Now, today we call everything an agent.
Let's put a pin on agents for a second, because I want you to help me through kind of a step-by-step. Mm-hmm. A lot of this information is partially new for me, and I'm expecting for the audience as well, since they're mainly software engineers. But let's say I have an existing product and I want to embed some type of Gen AI feature, right? Whether it's PDF parsing and then getting context and pre-filling some form, or it's indeed being between chat and checking for tone of voice with regards to the communication that's there. Mm-hmm. I can call an API and I have a model, so I can get stuff up and running quite quickly. Yes. But what would be the next step? Is that evals? Is that more observability with regards to some of the metrics, first time to token, or measuring the performance, or what would be the next step to go actually towards production?
Yeah. Well, what you're talking about is not an agent really. No. So if it's just an API call, again, it's a very deterministic in certain, well, more or less, LLM workflow, right? Indeed, what you need to add is evaluation. You need to have labels, actual labels done by humans. Mm-hmm. So the tone of voice example, right? It's actually a classification problem. So the way you evaluate it is the same way as you would evaluate a classifier. You have your accuracy of one score, cost of your false negative, false positives. That's what you need to account for, and maximize for the value. I think that's a very straightforward example. It's pure data science, except that instead of a model like an scikit-learn, you're using an LLM to do that.
When you're starting to label things with regards to evaluations, do you let something run in test acceptance or production where you have the data that you can label, or how do you typically approach that?
Well, I think overall in development, acceptance, and production, we need to have access to the same data, just to start with. It must be all production data, and of course, you shouldn't be able to write from development to production. So it's just read access. Mm-hmm. So the data is the same. So you basically, when we're talking about labeling, it's a separate process that is outside of your development cycle. Yeah. I mean, it's tied together, but I think it must be viewed as a separate stream.
But it's always production data that you're labeling?
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. So then I will go live with something that is unlabeled typically in production to get to a step where I can label?
Yes.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah, that's a very interesting part of data science in general. Yes. Yeah.
And then when I am on production and I can label things, this is where you pull in your business experts with regards to, okay, what is your opinion on this?
Well,
or I think typically who does this?
Yeah, but I think before you deploy this kind of classifier that uses LLM, you already need to have examples, and you need to already have someone, a human, having labeled that already before, ideally. You can do it half human, half LLM labeling. Like there are different approaches. I think LLMs are pretty okay in labeling things, especially when they're as straightforward as this example. But I mean, some examples are just not that straightforward, and you need to align your human judgment with your LLM judgment, and to have this LLM judge, to have certain level of accuracy, I guess. So that's one part. So you already need to have this labeled data, and you already need to evaluate your agent and maybe fine-tune your agent. So what can you fine-tune in this scenario? You can fine-tune your prompt. And there, like MLflow prompt fine-tuning, there is Adal flow that also does prompt fine-tuning. That's basically like in data science. Instead of fine-tuning your model, you fine-tune your prompt. It's kind of the same process, right? Yeah. And for classification, I would probably do it, periodically. Just like you retrain your model, your actual model that is behind it, especially if you don't host it yourself, it may change, right? It may change. So you don't even know whether it's going to perform, in an expected way.
How do you figure out if your model, whether it's behind an API, I mean, self-hosted doesn't really change because you would know about it, but typically those that are not yours, not self-hosted, they can change. You mentioned that. How do you measure if they have changed?
Yeah, well, you need to monitor real time whenever possible, or with a delay when your labels are delayed. You just, so this LLM evaluator that I was talking about. So let's say we take this example of this sentiment, what the sentiment is, is good. So we can see what LLM is evaluating. And that's something that we can see skewness on in real time, and we can put some alerts on top of that. So there are some detection of the drift, for example, that you can implement there.
Gotcha. And these same type of metrics and signals you would use for example, adjusting your prompt.
Yeah.
Because then you can see the same changes with regards to the data set that you already have.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So I understand evals. What tooling would you typically use for that? Do people build their own custom things, or what is kind of mature on the platform out there?
Well, I think you always have to build something custom anyways, because your problems are never that easiest, which now discussed, right? Yeah. They are pretty complicated. And what you're trying to evaluate for is pretty custom usually, right? Like, for example, I don't know, you want to process some documents, and in the end, these documents must be stored in a very specific way. So you need to basically say, is it correct? Is that way that it's now output it? Is it actually correct? Some of them are pretty deterministic. I know you could use Pydantic maybe even. But some of them are not necessarily that deterministic. So that's not an evaluator that you can find in any library, right? So you have to create your own custom evaluation. But there are tools that facilitate this kind of custom evaluation, like MLflow. I mean, I don't know how many of these tools survive anyways, but I'm pretty sure MLflow will survive. So
yeah. No, I like your thought process in that you will need something custom, and typically people build that around their own solution.
But monitoring in general in ML is very custom. Like, I mean, who cares anyways about accuracy? I mean, kind of cares, but what we care about is the business value, right? So, and to monitor business value, it's custom. It's always custom. So, and that's why monitoring is hard. That's why.
I mean, monitoring accuracy is easy. I feel like monitoring
but who cares
business value
about accuracy,
is
right?
way more difficult.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
How do you get to a point where you actually have proper metrics on the business value of your solution that you've built?
Yeah, well, I don't really have answer for that. I think no one really has, because it depends. It really depends on the problem you're trying to solve. For some problems, it's very straightforward. For some, it's not. For classification, it's typically easier. You also can estimate the costs of your false negatives and false positives. And I think that's what you need to, kind of steer towards. Minimizing the loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like this is where
maximizing profit.
I feel like this is where a lot of product understanding will also come to the teams.
Yes.
And even though those metrics are very far apart from maybe the feature that you're building, things like, okay, are our users actually happy with regards to the functionality on our platform? The functionality that you're building, that is contributing towards that, and happiness, depending on what your revenue model is of your product, whether it's retention or actually conversion. Those things you will need to be aware of to actually be able to track business value. Yeah,
exactly. I don't know, like there are so many different business problems you're trying to solve, right? So for example, cross-sell on the web page. So I guess we do care if we show up a product that the person maybe adds it to the basket, but what we really care about is that the total basket value increases. That's what we care about. If they do add what we suggest, but the basket value is not increasing, like why are we doing that anyways, right?
It's just different.
Yeah. So indeed, so what we steer our algorithm towards is often different than what we actually care about. And yeah, it's very hard to align it in general.
Interesting. Yeah. I understand how these concepts come together, from actually calling an API, let's say, that has an LLM behind it, to adding evals and the right observations to catch drift, and also figure out if the changes you make to a prompt are actually benefiting the product in the end, or the feature in the end. I've also seen people kind of struggle with regards to picking the right model. But if you have this in production, I feel like picking the right model for your feature becomes a lot easier. Now there's the question of if your feature requires many models, if you have the factor of language, for example, you will also have to hook into within the same feature different models, and that gets another layer of complexity. But I feel like if you have these fundamentals, you can really build upon a solid foundation.
Yeah.
Is there anything that's still missing that you want to add on top of a setup like that?
No, I think we covered pretty much the basics. Yeah, you can always make things more complicated, like by having these multi-agent systems.
Yeah.
So then each of the parts must be evaluated. So you basically, observability gets harder and harder the extra level of complexity you add. And then you need to start thinking, do I really need this complexity just to start with? Maybe do I even need an agent? Do I need an LLM? So these kind of questions we need to really ask ourselves.
Those are the best questions. If you don't need it, don't use it.
Yeah, but I mean, it's always like that. People want to try all these new, shiny, cool things. I don't know, it always has been like that, right? And it's often resume-driven developments. That's what I see.
I've never heard that.
Yeah, that's a thing. So yeah, people do it just because they want to learn it. They think that it's useful for their career, whether it's actually useful for the business and the problem they're solving, not always.
Yeah. You touched on two topics. One is knowledge and one is more organizational maturity. I want to cover knowledge first because you mentioned these are very much data science principles. In teams that you've seen operate effectively in the features that they build, do they usually have data science people embedded in that team, or how do software engineers familiarize themselves with these concepts with regards to MLOps?
Yeah, well, I think it varies. It depends on the company. I think there are some really good examples of teams that actually indeed think about that from data science perspective. And I think these are previously mature organizations that were doing MLOps well in the past. So they already have this kind of data science, software engineering way of thinking blended together.
Yeah.
So those do it well. They know what they're doing. But there are teams that, they just had some software engineering teams and they just rebranded them into agentic AI teams,
product teams,
whatever. Yeah, no, those don't do well. No. And also data scientists that are used to notebooks and then they start also developing those systems, they also don't do well.
No.
So, I think maturity here is the key, and we have a very, very long way to go to get there. Yeah.
What's the best way for people to gain that knowledge? Is it to go YouTube and check out some videos? Is it to go to conferences, read books? What is your advice?
Yeah. There is just so much knowledge available already. And I think you just need to know what people to follow and who says something that actually makes sense. I think there are a lot of really nice courses on Maven that, I like a lot. We also have course on Maven, by the way. Yes. MLOps with Databricks specifically. I think we talk about tools and principles first. So like, how do you apply the principles to build proper systems? And we do use Databricks just because it's easy. It's all embedded. And there are two little examples of how to do it well on Databricks. So that's why we teach it.
Nice.
But I think there are a lot of awesome courses like Hugo Bono Anderson. He also has a course on Maven. They focus on evaluations and building agents. So not a lot like we focus really on ops side of things more, and they focus more on building good agents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What you mentioned in that an organization needs to be mature is really a foundation for a team to thrive in the first place. Already the fact that some organizations that I've been in do not have production data available in the other environments, and data availability has always been a challenge for them. It means that actually getting whatever AI feature you're building to a mature level is going to be very challenging because you don't have solid foundation to build on top of. And then you get all the complexity of doing that in the first place.
No, for sure. I think if you have these foundations, you will be all right. If you don't, then invest in those first and don't try to do all the shiny things instead. Yeah.
But I want to start with the results from a business perspective. Now I get that. Organizational maturity has always been complex.
Yeah, indeed. And I think we now moved also into consulting, and I guess before you are exposed to certain set, and now the set of things you look at, it becomes bigger, and you just realize, everyone is struggling. Everyone is struggling.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. I do like that a lot of people are looking into this. And the fact that people are, that means when people figure things out, knowledge is being shared. Or when new things come out, people try it, they figure things out, and they talk to each other and they share that knowledge. That's always been the most fun of being part of this industry specifically.
Yeah.
And I don't know any other industry that does that. Especially now, I feel like it's happening a lot.
Yeah.
And I'm having a lot of fun with it specifically.
Yeah, no, I agree. I also really enjoy sharing my knowledge. I write a lot on LinkedIn. We also have Substack, and and also writing a book. So it's a lot of effort writing a book. Oh my God.
It is, no?
Yeah, but it's fun because I think it's needed. And I think once you get some knowledge, some understanding, you need to share it with other people. So I think it must come from the right motivations, because some just want followers, I don't know. And they don't know what they're talking about. That's what I also have seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I like people that share knowledge. And I do feel like great content sometimes you also have to pay for, but a lot of great content is also out there free on YouTube, for example, or a lot of news articles. So it's really whatever your preference is for consuming knowledge. I feel like that's out there.
No, definitely.
This is just very, very fresh.
Yeah. No, we also have a free MLOps course on YouTube. It's MLOps, so it's not about agents, but I mean, it's really the same. Like a lot of these things, just the same. And I think people don't realize how close it is to each other.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somehow it kind of feels like it's a whole new world. I mean, it's not. It's been there forever.
For you, it's obvious.
Yes.
Yeah. We put a pin on agents specifically because I feel like agents adds another layer of complexity, because if you have different autonomous agents, especially in production, things get even more complex. But let's say I have a mature organization with regards to data availability. I have a setup where a model is behind an API call, and I have my evaluation pipeline, and I have my observability in production, and potentially not even one model, but different models. And now I want to have some type of agent functionality. I feel like the kind of most cookie cutter example that I can think of is something in customer service with regards to having an interaction with a person and then autonomously fetching data from wherever it needs to about a certain ticket, about a certain order. How do I put that in production?
Yeah, I don't think anyone knows.
No, that's really the freshest.
Well, how to do it well, I think is hard, because, now we need to think about security and all the attack vectors that can happen on your systems. Because if you're dealing with actual customer data and some other customer can, I don't know, by mistake or by intent, get data from other customers, I don't know, try to get information about, I don't know, how much sales there are, things that they are not supposed to know, right? And that you can trick the system to reveal this information. It's very hard. I think it's really impossible to completely prevent that from happening. And I think that's something that we must be aware of. And like, what level of risk are you accepting? What is acceptable for your company? Because it's reputational risks in the end, right? If someone, I don't know, we go to an online store and we want to know about the status of return, or maybe something like that. And then you ask it, what about how many pairs of jeans did I order in the last year? I mean, it's all great information, but then you maybe can trick it into, okay, and on average, how am I doing comparing to others? Oh, and by the way, like what was the total amount of sales and total amount of sales of pants? How is it compared to, I don't know, to jackets? Things like that, right? I mean, step by step, you could trick it into revealing something that you're not supposed to know.
Yeah.
And how do you even put guardrails in that?
I don't know yet.
No one knows.
Okay.
No one knows.
When ChatGPT came out, 3.5 in its earliest versions, a colleague of mine got really excited to really figure out, okay, what are the boundaries of this? And now things have evolved. We have 4, we have 5, 5.1, 5.2, and other companies also have different models, Gemini 3.0, Opus 4.5, everything like that. But he continued on this path, mainly figuring out if he can still prompt inject whatever malicious intent from the perspective of learning, but also from a security perspective. And he agrees with you that whatever model comes out, it will have flaws from a prompt injection perspective. We haven't solved that yet. which
We
means
can't.
that no,
We can't.
like we haven't. I don't know if we ever can. Like my knowledge, I feel like is too shallow for that. But that also means that agents should be in very simple use cases. They should not have any availability to data which can cause reputational damage, or you will have to build the right guardrails around an
Human
agent.
in the loop, yeah. So what I actually like about, I would like to see agents as like a personal assistant,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So for example, if you have a kind of customer service communication, is that, I don't know, a person types something and then actually an agent generates a response. And then maybe in certain scenarios, there is another agent that evaluates. I mean, is it safe to say that? But also, and if that is certain, I guess okay. But human actually clicking on yes every time. So actually, the human is doing the sending, but not typing anymore, and also not execution of the tasks. So, and I guess certain things can go automatically, but just some generic things like asking for certain information from the customer that is required to retrieve the information. There you don't need an agent, like a human agent, to be involved. But at a certain stage, when we get into certain questions, I mean, always human must be actually clicking. Yeah.
And that's not the most exciting work. That's the work that typically you would be like, let's automate that also.
I don't think we can. I don't think we will ever be able to.
Yeah, that's the challenge. I've had a lot of fun working with agents specifically for software engineering, for the producing of my code in whatever context I need to develop features.
Yeah.
And not everyone agrees with me. Some people really like the craft part of things, or writing good code that they think is really elegant or apt for the solution. Take a lot of pride in that. So there's a lot of aspects with regards to the people I talk to. Either they're in one camp, I don't like it. Code generation is kind of taken away from my craft, and that's what I found joy in. And then I say typically just keep doing that and see how else it can make you productive. Or people like me, where they really enjoy kind of the productivity boost and they want to work towards outcomes.
Yeah.
I'm wondering, from your sense, what have you found that works well for your own producing, whatever that is?
Yeah, I'm opinionated on how my code should look like, but I already have enough examples for Claude to generate something that is similar to what I think is good. And I have pretty clear instructions of that should look like. And I think the more examples you have, the more clear instructions are, the better and the closer the output is to what you need and what you like and what you find acceptable. And then it is a productivity boost for sure. So I think you just need to find the right balance between these two things. And I mean, it's not easy.
No.
It's not easy.
Let's zoom in on that, because I feel like opinionated people, they have it easy because they have an opinion. So they know kind of how to define at least some kind of rules of guidance for something that generates code, let's say. If you don't have an opinion, you need to figure out what your opinion is in the first place before you can actually have an opinion on what the output is. But how do you then structure your opinion? Is it in skills? Is it in a Claude MD file, to take Claude as a specific example?
Yeah.
How do you structure that?
Well, I am yet to try skills.
Okay.
I am behind on this. But yeah, it is typically in Claude MD file and other MD files that have been pointed from Claude MD. I mean, what I'm saying now is probably not already the best practice if we are looking at the skills, what's available there. And I have some MCPs configured. So I know, depending on the tasks that I'm doing, I know for example, we also now work with linear, and we have some brainstorm sessions and we write things down that should be there. And based on this example, we have also a prompt, an instruction, and based on that, it will generate tickets in linear, as expected. You can even maybe when you're in the car, you can dictate things on the phone, and on Apple. On the iPhone, you can also get transcriptions right away. And those you could also use to...
You're always working, even when driving.
Yeah. So, I mean, there are so many different tricks you could... I think these are really productivity boosts. So, like, when you have a conversation, you can record it and transcribe it and use it to create a summary and make a logbook of everything that's happening in your life. And you will be very thankful for doing that, I know, half a year later when you already forgot what you were doing. And having an interface to actually search through that. And I think Claude, for example, can connect to your Google Drive and actually be able to retrieve this information for you. So I think for me, it goes way beyond just code. Yeah.
I like that a lot. I wonder if we get to a future where, so when computers came out, we started typing, and then when phones came out, we started typing on our phones. But the way I can speak is way faster than my ability to type.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now if I want to be productive, if there are more tools for me to actually speak to, and that then becomes context for something that executes, if we move to a society where people speak a lot more, then they're also better at communicating, better at kind of explaining themselves instead of typing. Because I feel like the people that type are not necessarily the best communicators if they only type. And for me to be more productive, if I then have to speak, that would be good, I think, as a personal skill as well, as a life skill.
Yeah. No, there is something in it for sure. But I think it's still different talking to yourself versus talking to another human, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. I think it's a good exercise.
It's interesting.
To have your thoughts more concise. And yeah, I do like writing though. I don't know. I like writing more than talking somehow.
I mean, do you like reading?
No, not per se.
Oh, interesting.
Well, no, actually, depend. I just don't have that much time for reading. I think that's it, really. So I'm listening more like podcasts and stuff, or books. Actually, I'm listening to the books, but it's mostly because I just don't have time. And when I'm driving, I'm trying to squeeze all the stuff that I want to do into that time. So then I'm talking and listening.
Yeah.
But it's not my natural preference, because
if I writing.
Writing and reading, because if I don't know, if I'm searching for information, I would not go to YouTube channel unless I really, really have to. Just because, I don't know, maybe it's my personality, but I rarely like the voice of other people talking, or I don't know why. It's really, it's me really, right? It's always been like that. So it's not like, so I do like reading more because it goes through my lens somehow, right?
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, so it's easier for me to get this information out of the text and the visualization rather than hearing.
I think it's really, really cool that you say, okay, this is my kind of natural preference, but I just don't have time for that. So I do this instead, which is still like everything in mind with regards to productivity.
Yeah.
I learned something new about specifically Claude and skills, because previously I had a big Claude MD file with my code conventions. And then a colleague of mine said, I had so many that Claude started complaining, because when you load in a Claude MD file, that's too much. He said it's about, I think, 1,000 or 2,000 lines. There's guidelines on this on the Anthropic website. Then it might actually miss parts of that context that it loads in. And he says, that's when I use skills. So code conventions, styles with regards to a certain controller.
That's what I heard,
That's what he's been using, and he's really happy with it.
Everyone is so happy with skills. So now it's Christmas vacation.
Yeah,
so
you're gonna
I'm gonna do that. Yes, I'm finally gonna do it, because I just so much stuff I need to do. Like,
of course.
Just this little tiny thing to try already feels too much.
Where I really use skills in my own thing is mainly for content creation. So episodes come out, I have a transcript of an episode, I need to figure out titles and thumbnails and descriptions and timestamps. I made that into a skill. I was like, let's try this thing out. And it actually works quite well. I'm happy with it.
That's awesome. Yeah.
But everything with regards to personal productivity and experimenting, I feel like is just really fun to do, to be honest.
But I don't really have like very large files like Claude MD and other MD. I mean, they're still manageable, but they're per repo. So I have many repos, and in those repos you have this. But yeah, it's like, I do like mono repos, but not for personal projects somehow. Like,
How do you split those up? Personal projects? Not in a mono repo, or?
No, it's not mono repo. It's all separate things, separate repos. Like even tiny things, relatively tiny things are different repos for me.
Why is that? You just want them isolated?
Yeah, I just want them isolated.
Okay.
Yeah, I know it's personal preference. Yeah,
interesting.
But when you talk about, I don't know, actual production, monorepo makes a lot of sense for different use cases. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I think sometimes that might be controversial, or kind of the thought on the internet has shifted around. First monorepos were evil, and now people are coming back on that,
it's
and
so
people are saying it's actually quite stable.
Yeah, right. It's so funny how the world changes in that regard. Yeah,
definitely. We've gone through, I feel like, more fundamentals of MLOps specifically for software engineers, going to production with a first model, and then also the challenges of having agents, and a little bit of personal productivity. In that conversation, is there anything that we missed that you still want to share?
No, I think we covered a lot.
Awesome. And thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, me too. It was fun.
Cool. We're going to round it off here. If you're still listening, let me know in the comment section what you thought of this episode, and we'll see you in the next one.